talk about leadership.
今仔早起，咱要来讲这个领导。
Christians sometimes talk about servant leadership, leading as a servant.
基督徒常常讲起一个观念，就是讲做奴仆这种的领导。
So I want to talk about what gifts or skills you need to lead as a servant.
所以我要来讲什么种的装备，什么种的技术，会当递到会当引带咱来成做一个侍奉奴仆的这种领导。
You all are leaders, and so you've heard many talks on leadership.
在座拢总是教会的领袖所以恁常常咧讲常常听什么叫做领导。
But I want to use a text from Isaiah 11 this morning to talk about leadership.
今日早起，我要对这个以赛亚书11章来讲什么是领
导。Isaiah 11 is talking about gifts that come from the Spirit.
以赛亚11章是咧讲对圣神上帝的神所来的迄种文书，有关这个领导的文书。
Many of us are familiar with the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5.
足侪人拢知影属灵的文书，拢是对这个加勒太书第5章。
In fact, let's see if we can name the fruit of the Spirit that's in Galatians 5.
咱来看恁敢会当记忆中遐圣神的轨迹是啥物
？Kindness,
yes.
And self-control.
Love. Starts with that. Joy. Peace.
Humanity.
You have to catch up.
Patience.
Kindness. Generosity. Faithfulness. Gentleness. Self-control.
Yeah. 仁爱、欢喜、和平、吞忍、慈悲、善良、忠信、温柔、尊赞。
So this is a New Testament list, and notice that it's the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruits of the Spirit. They all come together as one. They're considered one fruit.
这是新约对这圣神所给的轨迹的一个名单。请咱注意，这个轨迹这字伫希腊文内底是单数，所以这个物件以上所讲的，这个安尼结合做伙一个轨迹。
And then also in the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 12, we get a list of the gifts of the Spirit.
相像伫哥林多前书12章，咱有一个另外一个名单咧讲即个属灵的文书。
But the Old Testament also provides us with insights into leadership.
我伫旧约嘛有互咱即个有关领导这方面的即个看。
So let's read Isaiah 11, 1 through 10 together.
所以咱来做伙读以赛亚书11章第1节到第10节。
Isaiah 11:1, a shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots.
对耶西的树头要发起影，对伊的根所生的枝要结果子。
The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord.
耶和华的神要点伫伊，就是智慧、聪明的神，记忆、能力的神，知识甲敬畏耶和华的神。
He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked.
伊要掠敬畏耶和华做欢喜，毋是凭目睭所看见来审判，也毋是凭耳孔所听见来举断。伊要用公义审判丧用人，用正直理断世上欠卑的人，用喙中的管拍世界，用喙唇的开杀死歹人。
Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins.
公义要做伊的腰带，信实要做伊身躯的带。
The wolf shall lie with the lamb, and the leper shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them.
豺狼要甲绵羊仔三角大，霸甲山羊囝三角倒地，牛仔甲细只狮甲肥的精生，做细汉的囡仔要牵伊。
The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den.
牛甲熊要三角食，因的囝要三角倒地，狮要食草亲像牛，食恁的囡仔要佚佗伫恶蛇的空口，长内的囡仔要下手伫毒蛇的。
They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
伫我的圣山的遍地，的确无损害、无损伤、无陷害，因为人捌耶和华的知识要充满地上，亲像水淹满伫洋海。
On that day the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious.
到迄日，亚西的肩头徛做万百姓的大旗，列邦要归我伊安息的所在有大阳光。
Okay, so let's look at this scripture, Isaiah 11, in some detail.
咱即时来看即个以赛亚书11章看伊的细节。
What is the stump of Jesse?
即个亚西的树头的迄支影是啥物？
Who is Jesse?
啥物人是亚西？
Yes, Jesse is the father of King David.
亚西是大卫王的爸爸。
And a stump, of course, is a part of a tree that's been cut down.
这树头是树的一部分，不过是树已经互人扯落来了剩的一部分。
So what was once a mighty and big tree has now been reduced down to a stump.
所以本来是一丛真大丛真悬的树，因为扯了后，即马剩安尼足低啊，剩一个树头。
The tree has been cut down.
树已经互人扯落来。
The tree is not the same size that it once was in the past.
已经毋是伊过去迄个大丛的形。
So scholars think that the historical event behind this is the end of the kingdom, David's kingdom.
所以学者咧讲，即搭咧讲的即个意思，是咧指大卫的即个王国已经无搁再存在迄个情形。
David's kingdom came to an end in 587 BC.
大卫的即个王国主前587年来结束。
The Babylonians came in to Judah and Jerusalem and conquered Jerusalem.
巴比伦攻入即个耶路撒冷，将即个所在拢总毁坏。
And Jerusalem was completely destroyed, and the Israelites went into exile.
耶路撒冷完全受到破坏，以色列百姓受掠到巴比伦。
So it's interesting that the image used here is of a stump.
而且所用的这种的上灯，这种的图就是讲用树头来解说这种的损害。
Because a stump still has the possibility of new growth.
趣味的所在是讲，这个树头呢，还佫会当发新的叶呢，毋是完全拢无希望。
A branch growing out of a stump would be new life.
那对这个树头所发的枝伊会当成做新的生命。
So the stump represents a major destruction of the tree, but it also represents the possibility of new growth.
所以树头上灯一个真大的这个损坏甲破坏，毋过上时阵伊也上灯新的生命的可能性，新的愿望的可能性。
So the stump of Jesse is the kingdom, David's kingdom.
所以亚西的树头是大卫的王国。
And we have a shoot or a branch that's coming up out of this stump.
遮咧讲有一个影对这个树头来发生。
I found this image online.
我伫这个网络顶悬看找到这个图啊
So you can see the axe has been put to the tree and it's cut down in size.
你有看到这一支斧头已经将这个树已经扯落来，即马放伫这个树头的所在。
But we still have a shoot or a branch coming out of the side.
毋过咱伫看这边佫补一个新的影，发一个枝遐。
So if this text was written during the Babylonian exile, then it gives hope to the people.
这段的经文伫狩猎巴比伦的时代所写，伊互这个狩猎伫巴比伦的百姓一个新的愿望。
It is a prophecy of hope about the restoration of the kingdom.
这是有关这个王国要搁再复得的一个先知的话。
And the hope is that a certain figure called the shoot or the branch, that certain figure will restore Israel.
这个愿望，新的愿望是咧提起有一个人啦有一个人物，伊要来复得这个大卫的家。
Hopefully someone will be able to bring to continue David's line.
愿望讲有一个人会当延续大卫的家这种的活动。
But why mention Jesse and not David?
不过是安怎提起亚西，无讲伊应该会当讲大卫啦，是安怎提起亚西，无提起大卫？
If you're trying to talk about David and David's kingdom, then why not just say David?
你若想要爱讲大卫的王国要复得，是安尼，你太无直接讲大卫就好咧。
You could say the Bible could say that David is a big tree, and now David has been cut down.
圣经会当讲大卫是一丛真大丛的树，这丛大丛的树，大卫的树，即马互人扯落来。
Some say that that would be too direct to talk that badly about David.
有人讲安尼直接讲大卫互人扯落来，安尼伤过直接。
And others say that perhaps talking about Jesse is talking about David's humble origins.
有人讲提起亚西是咧讲大卫伊迄个谦卑卑微的迄种出身。
You know the story. David didn't start out as this great and powerful king, right? He started out as a shepherd boy.
你拢知影迄个故事，大卫毋是尊贵的出身，毋是王伊是对即个顾养的一个囡仔出身的。
So the image here is of a tree cut down, but not completely cut down.
所以伫遮咱所看到的是一丛树互人插落来，毋过无完全来消灭。
We may think all hope is lost, all hope is gone, but the tree is still there. Part of the tree is still there.
咱可能会想讲，迄个愿望拢完全拢已经消灭，啊，毋过伫遮看到的是讲，还佫有一寡物件留伫遐啦。
So good leaders, I think, during times of crisis, try to see hope.
所以好的领袖，伫危机的中间，爱会当看出愿望伫啥物所在。
In a time of crisis, we need to see if the tree has been completely removed or if the tree has just been cut down to a stump.
你若拄着危机的时，一个领袖你来判断讲，你到底这是完全拢无希望吗？还是讲还佫有留一个树头伫遐？
So the person that Isaiah 11 is talking about, I want to use that person to talk about what good leadership is.
遮咧提起即个要福道以色列国愿望的即个人物，我要通过即个人物来报咱知一个好的领袖爱具备啥物种的特质。
And what leadership is like in a time of crisis.
啥物种的领导是伫一个危机的情形下面所需要的。
When things are not going well.
当代志毋是真顺利的时，你需要啥物种的领袖的特质？
So verse 2 says that the Spirit of God is upon him, this figure.
第二节，伊讲即个人物呢，伊有耶和华的神贴伫伊。
This figure in the line of David has the Spirit resting upon him.
即个对大笔的即个世系所来的即个人物呢，有耶和华的神来甲伊三角地地。
Let's think about that image of the Spirit of God in the Old Testament.
咱来看即个伫旧约的内底，耶和华的神代表什么意思？
What does it mean to have the Spirit of God upon you?
互耶和华的神踮伫你的顶面，这是什么意思？
Who has the Spirit of God upon them in the Old Testament?
伫旧约中间什么人有即个耶和华的神伫伊的身上？
Mostly the phrase Spirit of God occurs in the context of judges and kings.
大部分咧讲上帝的神甲一个人三角地地，通常咧讲的即种人呢，就是即个士师甲国王
The Spirit is upon people in leadership positions.
上帝的神通常拢降临伫遐徛伫领导地位的人。
The leader needs the Spirit to guide them as they lead.
这领袖需要上帝的神来帮助因带因安怎领导百姓。
So in the book of Judges, you will remember that the Spirit comes upon a judge in a specific situation.
你若读这士师记，你就会看到讲，上帝的神降临伫一个士师，伊会当因为安尼来领导上帝的百姓。
The judges are given the power to help Israel during a time of crisis. 士师
有得到上帝所予伊的气力，来领导以色列百姓，来度过这个难关。
The judges help during a time of oppression for Israel.
这士师帮助以色列百姓，来克服这个受压制的这种苦难。
Then peace comes upon the land, and the judge is no longer needed.
所以当这个难关危机过去了后，和平临到，这个士师就无搁再有需要，无需要搁再有士师。
Then the people don't listen, they become oppressed, and they need another judge.
百姓就渐渐无爱听上帝的话，煞咧迄个迫害就搁临到，伊搁需要另外一个士师。
And that judge has the Spirit come upon them in order to help the people.
迄个士师搁再一摆需要上帝的神，所以伊才会当帮助这个上帝的百姓。
So it becomes a cycle in the book of Judges, and the cycle includes the Spirit of God coming upon people.
所以咧变做一种的循环。不过这个循环内底需要重要的成分就是上帝的神降临伫这个事事的身上。
The Spirit of God is also connected to kings.
上帝的神嘛降临伫这个王的身上。
The Bible says that the Spirit is upon Saul and upon David.
圣经讲上帝的神有降临伫扫罗，嘛有伫大卫的身上。
In fact, the Bible says at one point that the Spirit of God is taken away from Saul.
圣经有一位讲有一个时阵上帝的神离开这个大卫，离开这个扫罗。
In order to show that David is the ruler now, the king now.
用安尼来描写讲，扫罗已经不是领袖，大卫才是新的领袖。
So the Spirit is connected to leadership, to judges leading and to kings leading.
所以上帝的神牵连到什么是领导，因为对士师到国王，这拢是领袖，这拢甲上帝的神有关联。
So Isaiah 11:2, when it says the Spirit comes upon this person, it's trying to tell us this person is going to be a leader.
所以第二节，伊咧讲上帝的神要点伫伊，安尼就是咧甲咱讲，这个人要真做领袖。
And then in verse 2, we get 3 pairs or 6 total descriptions related to the Spirit.
伫第二节要出的部分，咱有看到三对的这个有关上帝的神的这个特质就6项物件3对。
These are what I'm calling the Old Testament gifts of the Spirit.
这就我甲这称呼做，这是旧约的圣神的这个文书。
These are the characteristics we see when someone is following the Spirit.
这个特质就是你若顺探圣神的领导的，拢有这个特质。
So first we have the spirit of wisdom and understanding.
圣经讲第一项第一对就是这个智慧的神甲聪明的神。
The word wisdom occurs in the biblical books Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes.
这智慧这个物件伫咱的圣经旧约圣经内底出现伫这个箴言约伯记甲传道书。
We call these biblical books the wisdom literature.
咱称呼这个册叫做智慧文学。
Because these books contain insights into how to live your life.
因为这个册咧甲咱讲要安怎生活的一种智慧啦。
Wisdom is, according to the Bible, wisdom is not about intelligence.
伫圣经内底咧讲的智慧，毋是你的智能这个智力、你的智商，你有偌聪明。
I want my students in seminary to be smart, but I also want them to be wise.
我爱我的神学院的学生因爱真聪明，不过我嘛爱因有智慧。
And there's a difference between those, being smart and being wise.
你拢知这个聪明甲智慧中间有差别。
I know many smart pastors, and I know many smart pastors who are not necessarily wise.
我知影真侪聪明的牧师无拄拄有智慧。
Wisdom is about living a good life or how to act correctly.
智慧是要安怎活一个真有意义的生活，要安怎what is the second part of it? Living
Good life, correct behavior.
有这个正确的行为。
So it's not about how much knowledge you have about the Bible or anything.
所以毋是讲，迄毋是咧智慧，毋是咧讲你圣经的知识有偌饱。
So the leader here is not to have a spirit of intelligence.
所以即个即个领袖毋是爱有即个知识迄方面的智慧的，迄种的迄个文书，毋是知识迄方面的文书。
Instead, the leader here is to have a spirit of wisdom.
即个一个领袖毋是迄种知识的，是智慧即种的文书。
Wisdom knows how to respond to difficult situations.
你若有智慧，你就知影伫困难的迄种情形，你要怎样回应。
And the second word there is related to wisdom, understanding.
第二个项物件即个甲即个智慧有关联就是聪明。咱句understanding 某一种的理解。
So those two words in the Bible are often found together.
伫圣经内底智慧甲理解聪明通常拢做伙。
Understanding is about understanding and comprehending situations, understanding what's going on in certain situations.
这理解就是了解这个特别某一种情形的各种的层面。
So it's related to wisdom.
所以这甲智慧有关联。
So we have this leader who has the Spirit upon them, and they have a spirit of wisdom and a spirit of understanding.
所以这领袖不但有这个上帝的神伫因的心上，上时阵因也有智慧甲理解聪明的心。
They're able to make good decisions.
因有法度通做好的决定。
As they lead, they are able to interpret situations that need handling, that they need to step in and understand.
因咧领导的时伊有法度通说明，有法度通理解整个的情形来做好的决定。
And notice that it's from the Spirit of God. The source is the Spirit of God.
这个物件拢来源源头拢是对上帝的智慧，上帝的神。
So intelligence might come from reading books or listening to smart people talk.
你若是一般的聪明迄种财物迄方面的聪明，你会当对册来学，你会当对甲遐个聪明的人讲话来得到。
But God is the source of the wisdom.
毋过智慧最后的源头是对上帝来。
So you can't get a college degree in wisdom.
你无法度通得到一个智慧的大学的学位啦。
You get your degree in wisdom from God, right? And from living your life and experiencing struggles and challenges.
你若真正要得到一个智慧的这个学位，无法度对大学来摕到，你得对上帝来，对你甲人中间你的接触，解决这个问题，对这个实际的情形来得到这个学位。
So that's the first two gifts of the Spirit.
所以头两项的这个圣神的这个文书头两项物件。
And we're thinking about how those two gifts relate to leadership.
咱知这两项的文书怎样甲领导有关系。
The next two gifts of the Spirit are counsel and might.
第二对第三项、第四项啦这个圣神的文书就是记忆甲能力。
In English, it says counsel and might. Some translations say advice and determination.
为迄个为英语的翻译伊是讲某一种的建议advice and
Determination.
甲某一种的决断力。
So what is the Taiwanese translation literally?
It says basically counsel,
counsel,
counsel and might.
and might. Yeah.
Basically,
Okay.
well, actually, it says for counsel, it means some ability to design,
Yeah.
to make
Yeah, that's good.
plans.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good one. Some translations have strategy.
Yeah,
Would that-
有一寡
yeah,
有一寡迄个翻译是写讲吼某一种策略，有法度通吼做策略性的思考的能力。
These two words are found again later in Isaiah, and the English translates it strategy and power.
这两项物件伫以赛亚书的较后壁的所在，会搁再一摆出现，毋过伫遐英语的圣经翻译做策略甲能力。
So the first word, I think, is dealing with a practical matter.
所以第一字是甲即个实际上的处理代志有关系。
It's talking about making plans, completing goals that you set.
伊是甲计划甲实践实行你的计划有关的。
These are not necessarily big theological matters like wisdom is.
这毋是迄种足高深的迄种神学的物件亲像迄种亲像智慧迄种的高深的神学，真实际。
But they're still part of the work of a leader.
毋过嘛是要阁是即个领袖因的能力的一部分。
Leadership also involves practical matters, not just theological matters.
一个领导毋是单需要有即个神学方面的即种的能力，伊嘛得要有实际真实际、脚踏实地做代志的能力。
So I like it that the text doesn't just say a spirit of wisdom and leaves it without talking about practical things as well.
所以我真欢喜这毋是只有智慧迄种的神煞来单停伫遐，这嘛有继续搁讲起真实际的即种的文字。
And then the second word, determination or power.
第二字即个第二对内底的第二项物件，咧讲即个决断力，也是讲能力。
Is having the ability to continue on in times of crisis.
是咧讲伫危机的时，你有法度通持续继续安尼运作。
Leadership as the ability to face adversity and to continue on.
领导就是讲你当拄着有人反对你，甲你做对敌的时，你有法度通去继续做代志。
Remember here we're talking about a stump that's been cut down.
你要记哩，咱即个道就是讲一丛树扯起来，剩即个树头。
A stump has the potential to die, to go away.
这树头其实嘛有可能死去呢。
So these are not easy times for the Israelites.
所以这毋是对以色列百姓来讲，这毋是一个足容易的一个时间。
So they need a leader who has the determination to see them through this exile.
所以因需要迄个领袖有迄种决断力的领袖来引带因通过即个难关。
And again, the Spirit of God is the source of this type of leadership.
耶和华是即种型的智慧搁再一摆强调是即种的智慧的源头。
So God gives the ability to see where you want people to go.
所以上帝互人有即种看出要安怎继续向前行即种的能力。
God gives the vision.
上帝赏赐人有意向，也是讲 vision 愿景，将来迄个。
God gives the wisdom to know what the vision is.
上帝赏赐你有智慧，知影头前要爱向什么种方向去。
And then God gives the leader the determination to carry out the vision.
上帝详时也赏赐这个领袖，不但会当看出将来的方向，也互你有迄种的能力、决断力，也是迄种心内决心，通向前行。
Even if the leader is a branch that's growing out of a stump of a tree.
准做讲，这个领袖不过是一个影那边。
You see, we think of leadership as being powerful and being in control. We think of presidents and prime ministers.
咱有当时也想讲领袖就是遐有权、有势、有能力的，亲像迄种总统啦，亲像迄种首相迄种的人。
But the Bible thinks of leadership as the branch.
不过圣经咧讲这领袖其实是亲像一个影安尼啦。
The Bible realizes that people will end up in exile, cut off.
圣经知影讲以色列百姓最后会受掠到巴比伦的所在，亲像树头安尼出起。
And the Bible realizes that there's always hope in those situations.
不过圣经也知影不管啥物种情形，也阁有愿望。
So a leader knows where the people need to go.
所以领袖知影百姓要去啥物所在。
And the leader knows how to get them there.
这个领袖知影要安怎甲百姓带去迄个所在。
And so that may require a lot of patience.
所以需要有当时需要真侪耐心。
But the leader has to use counsel and might.
不过这个领袖嘛需要除了耐心以外，需要这个经验，嘛需要能力。
Leaders have to use strategy.
领袖需要有某一种的策略。
Now the final two gifts of the Spirit.
最后两项的这个圣神的这个恩赐。
It says a spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord.
就是知捌甲敬畏耶和华的心。
How is knowledge and fear related to each other?
这个知捌也是讲知识，甲敬畏敬畏这两个物件有啥物关联
？What does knowing something have to do with being afraid?
你知影一项物件，甲你惊一项物件，敬畏啦敬畏，这有啥物关系？
At first, I think this is the most unusual pair. The other two pairs go together. This one you have to work on to make sense.
所以一看到这你有当时第一个想法就是讲，这两项无关系啊，甲其他迄两对的物件，其他迄两对的物件拢互相某一种的关联，不过这看无啥会出来。
But then we remember in the book of Proverbs.
不过咱随时想到伫这个箴言内底。
Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge." 箴言1章7節在講敬畏耶和華是知識的開始。So the way to get knowledge is to begin with fearing God.
所以你得到知識知捌是對敬畏耶和華開始。
The end of that verse, Proverbs 1:7 says, "Fools despise wisdom."
伫迄個箴言1章7節的結束後半段，伊講即個戇人看輕即個知識，看輕智慧。
So fools, those who don't have knowledge, right, are the ones who don't fear God.
所以咧講即個戇人就是講無知識無知捌的戇人，其實就是咧講因無敬畏耶和華。
The word here, fear God, also means in Hebrew to revere God.
即這咱台語較厚啦。英語當然咱講 fear revere， 咱咧一句就甲翻譯了敬畏，有也有敬也有。
Does that show up in the Taiwanese translation?
Yes, it says two things.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Okay.
Fear and revere.
Perfect. We don't have that in English. We need that word in English. That's exactly what the Hebrew has two meanings, fear and revere.
原文的希伯来文吼，咱台语较接近吼，两项意思拢有吼，敬畏甲敬吼，敬畏敬虔吼。
So that means that that then the Taiwanese word is closer to the Hebrew concept.
迄个证明台语吼，比英语更较接近吼，即个希伯来文的想法。
Yeah. So then you can see how these two emotions or these two concepts are related. To be afraid, but also to revere something in your being afraid. You have to respect it.
所以你也看出这两项吼，这两项物件吼的关联啦吼，就是惊吼甲敬吼，畏甲敬中间吼有某一种密切的关系。
In fact, this happens in the Bible a lot. When angels come to people in the Bible, one of the first things they say is, "Fear not, do not be afraid."
你看这圣经内底足侪摆出现这种的观念吼，特别是这个天使吼出现伫人的面前的时，通常拢讲第一句话就是唔通惊吼。
So you can see how an angel appearing would be a moment of reverence, right, respect, but also a frightening, being afraid.
所以天使出现的是迄个时刻就是两种物件拢同时存在，一种敬，佮一种畏的迄种的情形。
So here we do have knowledge, which is different from wisdom.
所以遮有另外有即个物件叫做财物，还是讲知识，这甲智慧有相关无相像。
But again, this knowledge is not about just knowing stuff, knowing things.
不过即搭咧讲的即个知识财物，毋是咧讲知影某一项物件。
It's not just about education or going to school.
毋是咧讲你的迄个教育的迄种的知识。
Biblical knowledge, in the biblical sense, is not intelligence. 伫圣经内底咧讲即个财物智慧吼，毋是咧讲你的这愈来愈歹翻译 intelligence， 就是讲你的智能啦。 So knowledge is related to fearing God.
即个圣经咧讲的即个知识，是咧指敬畏耶和华、敬畏上帝。
So then this makes sense of the first half of verse 3. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord.
所以即个了后，你若煞接读第三节吼，迄第三节安尼看起来就较有意思。伊讲伊要掠敬畏耶和华做欢喜，即种的领袖。
So at first it doesn't make sense to delight in something that makes you afraid.
一看你若像感觉讲这安尼无真有意义，是安怎掠惊做欢喜吼？你若讲打畏吼做欢喜，畏甲欢喜是要安怎要安怎甲念做伙？
But if you see fear as both fear and reverence, then it makes sense to delight in respecting or revering God.
毋过你若感觉迄个惊有迄个敬的成分伫内底，你就知影讲吼是安怎伊嘛会当当做一种的欢喜。
So these are the gifts of the Spirit.
所以这是圣神的恩赐。
The spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord.
智慧聪明的神，记忆能力的神，财物甲敬畏耶和华的神。
These are the gifts that leaders need in times of crisis.
这个恩赐拢总是领袖伫这个危机的时所需要的恩赐。
So in the historical context, it's talking about one leader who will help establish the Davidic line, but I'm using it to talk about leadership in general.
伫圣经咧讲的这个历史上的背景，当然是咧指要有一个人物 具备这个温数，伊要来辅导这个代笔伊的这个细细。毋过我要用这个来讲现在教会的领袖。
And then the rest of the passage talks about the results of these leadership.
剩的11章这个经文呢，是咧讲你若具备这个温数的时，会产生什么种的效果
What is the point of these spiritual gifts?
这有你要爱有这种的温数到底是意义什么所在？为着什么目的？
Why do leaders need these spiritual gifts?
是安怎领袖需要这个温数？
How are leaders to use these spiritual gifts?
这个领袖要安怎运用这个圣神的温数？
Verses 3 and 4 answer this question.
第3节、第4节是咧回答这个问题。
He shall not judge by what his eyes see.
伊毋是要凭目睭所看见来判断、来审判，
or decide by what his ears hear.
也毋是凭伊的耳孔所听见来议断。
But this is exactly how our courts system works.
毋过凭目睭所看见、凭耳孔所听见，这是咱现在的法庭咧运作的方式。
That's how juries come to decisions, by what they see and what they hear.
这就是陪审团伊来判断、来议断的时的根据，凭因目睭所看见，凭因耳孔所听见。
This is why lawyers present evidence, right? The gun or the knife or
这就是安怎这个律师拢爱将这个证据摕来互你看这就是枪这就是刀互你看。
this is why lawyers call witnesses up to the stand to testify.
是安怎律师就爱叫这个证人坐起来遮用因家己的话来作证。
Our court systems are set up to judge by our eyes and by our ears.
咱的法庭是设计做互用听用看来做判断甲做审判。
And it was probably the same way in ancient Israel. The court systems were the same way, by what your eyes see, by what your ears hear.
伫古早的这个以色列的法庭嘛是安尼运作，凭你耳孔所听、目睭所看的来判断。
So this may have been a little surprising to the original audience.
所以这个讲法对这段的经文上早的这个听众来讲，会听了感觉真奇怪。
The leader does not judge by what the leader sees or by what the leader hears.
讲领袖无要凭伊目睭所看、耳孔所听来判断、来审判，真奇怪的代志。
So how does the leader judge?
毋过若安尼，你若毋是凭迄，无你凭啥物货来判断？
Verse 4.
第4节。
But with righteousness he shall judge the poor.
要用公义，毋是用遐头前咧讲的，是要用公义来审判这个送上人，
And decide with equity for the meek of the earth.
用正直来议断世上谦卑的人。
So righteousness and equality.
所以公义甲正直，
The leader judges fairly and rightly.
这领袖伊的判断就爱符合公义，就爱符合公平，正直。
But that judgment comes from the Spirit of God, not from what he sees and hears.
这种的判断只有对上帝所赏赐的智慧来，毋是对你的目睭所看、耳孔所听来。
And notice also who what the audience is, who is being judged.
你知影听这个话的人是啥物人？是啥物人在互人审判，在互人议断？
A leader with the Spirit of God upon them is always concerned about the poor and the meek.
这个受审判，咧讲，这领袖直接咧讲，领袖所审判、所议断的人，通常啦，拢总是这个送乡，这个这个较 较无遮个迄个办法的人、谦卑的人。
The leader is supposed it makes sure that the poor receive equal treatment.
这领袖爱保证吼，遮个较无遮个才调的人吼，遮个双向的人，因会当得到公平的审判。
But the leader needs those 6 spiritual gifts in order to judge the poor.
毋过，这个领袖需要迄6项的即个上帝的神的恩赐，来达到即个目标，就是互这个双向人得到公平正直的审判。
If the leader just judges by what he sees, then he may not see very much in the poor.
那领袖只有用伊的目睭来看，所看的来审判，其实目睭所看的真有限，伊无法度看出，无法度看出即个双向的人的真正的情形。
So these verses are trying to show us that the Spirit of God judges differently than the rest of the world.
所以这位的圣经在甲咱讲，上帝的神所做迄种的审判，甲其他即个整个的世界所在互你的审判是无相像。
The leader also has to wear special clothing.
即个审判官做审判，还是讲领袖的人，伊要穿特别的衫。
Verse 5.
第5节，
Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist.
公义要做伊的腰带，
Faithfulness the belt around his loins.
信实要做伊身躯的带。
So the leader puts on a belt of righteousness.
所以领袖下一条公义的带。
So the leader has the Spirit of God upon him or her.
所以领袖有上帝的神伫伊的身上。
And the leader wears the belt of righteousness.
领袖有那下公义的带。
Does it say belt? In Taiwanese, does it say belt?
Belt,
Oh,
yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Righteousness shall be the belt. This belt echoes. Some of you may remember in the New Testament, we're told to put on the armor of God.
即个讲下啦，穿迄个下即个公义的带其实伫新约圣经嘛有即个相对应的遐圣经节伊有所书咧讲你着爱用即个公义做你的军装
The New Testament writers didn't just make up that image. They didn't create that, right? They're reading the Old Testament, and so they get that from Isaiah.
即新约的作者毋是凭空来创造迄种的想法，伊是读即个以赛亚书来得来的即种的想法。
So we're thinking about leadership, and we're thinking about judging fairly and judging with righteousness.
所以咱咧讲领导嘛咧讲即个要安怎用公义、用正直来审判。
And then we come to verses 6 through 9.
所以咱即马煞接来看第6节到第9节。
These are beautiful images of peace.
这是足水一个和平的一个图面啊。
The Bible uses these images to explain what will happen if the leader judges righteously.
圣经用即幅图来描写，若准讲领袖伊真正用公义正直来审判的是迄个世界，正做啥物种的世界。
So we have a very logical presentation here.
咱遮有非常的迄个logical 真有逻辑迄种的讲法伫第6节到第9节的所在。
First, the passage talks about what the Spirit of God is.
上开始的圣经节咧讲上帝的神是啥物。
Then Isaiah 11 talks about what the leader will do with those spiritual gifts.
11章咧讲，你若刷来咧讲，领袖你若有上帝的神的时，会产生啥物种的结果
And then finally, the passage talks about what the world will look like as a result of the leadership.
最後在講這個世界會形成什麼種嘅世界？那陣講領袖攏用上帝嘅神、公義、正直來審判。
And these are pretty amazing images, a wolf lying with a lamb.
這咧寫嘅這個圖面這個講法攏非常嘅引人入勝啊！講豺狼甲綿羊三角大。
I haven't seen a wolf and a lamb together in Louisville yet.
我也佇Louisville這個所在，也毋捌看豺狼甲綿羊三角做伙是啥物。
My cat and my dog can't get along, much less a wolf and a lamb.
我的貓甲我的狗無法度人好好相處啊！莫講是迄個豺狼甲綿羊啊。
And it says in verse 6 that a little child will lead these wild animals.
第6節最後伊講，迄個上細漢的囡仔要看這個精生動物。
I think sometimes we dismiss this because we think this will never happen.
有當時啊咱將這個聖經節攏囥一邊啊，想講無可能發生。
But I think that misses the point of the passage.
不過安尼你就無看出這個你就失去，無法度人看到這個聖經的重點。
Maybe it's not literally that a wolf and a lamb will lie down, but the idea that things will live in harmony.
所以剛才毋是咧講照字面安尼來看講，真正一隻狼豺狼啊，甲綿羊三角做伙。剛才是咧講一個和諧大家人和平相處的世界。
So good leadership that listens to the Spirit will create harmony.
所以你若有咧注意上帝的神，你有咧聽上帝的神所甲你講的話，這種的領袖就會創造一個和諧的世界。
So maybe one way to think about it is the wolf and the lamb are actually parts of your churches.
剛才你若要互你想較有你就講豺狼甲綿羊你會當想講就是你的教會你的會友中間的某一部分。
So the leader is able to bring together the wolves and the lambs.
所以一個教會領袖就愛會曉將你的教會內底的豺狼甲綿羊互因安尼和諧相處。
Or if you don't like being called wolves, in verse 7 it says a cow and a bear.
你若感覺講豺狼甲綿羊你不愛用這種的講法第7節嘛有另外一種講法，講牛甲熊。
So the leader can bring together these very different animals.
這個領袖其實就是講你有迄個能力，通將迄個足無相像的牛甲熊食草甲食迄個會當將這個物件講三角隻這個足無相像的人甲伊結合做伙。
Some of the animals are predators who go out and hunt their food. Other animals just graze around and find their food.
有一寡動物，伊是就愛出去拍拉去搶伊的獵伊家己要愛食。有一寡動物不過就是塗骹的草安尼食寶寶安尼就好。
So maybe some of this reminds you of people in your church. It reminds me of people in my church.
檢查這個這種講法會當互你想起你的教會一寡甲這有關係的事實。
Hunters, people who are always looking for trouble.
這個講就愛出去獵食的這個攏是製造麻煩的。
So the leader with the Spirit of God can help bring some harmony to these different groups.
所以有上帝的神的這種領導者有法度通，互這個無相像這個族群這個人無相像的人來和諧，互伊和諧來相處。
Verse 8 talks about a child playing over the hole of an asp.
第8節在講囡仔伊佇這個佇這個蛇的穴蛇的空口佚佗。
So a situation that would once have been dangerous or even lethal for a child is now safe.
这意思就是讲，本来应该是对囡仔来讲足危险吼，有致命的危险吼，迄种的情形，即马变做一种真安全的代志。
So again, if we don't think about this literally, but we take it as an image, then we can see that it might be about a leader creating safe spaces for children.
所以你若莫甲伊读做安尼真字面安尼来读来理解，你嘛会当讲吼，一个领袖需要伫教会内底创造一种互囡仔真安全的一种空间。
And then finally, verse 9 ends with, the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord.
第9节最后结束的所在，在讲这个世界耶和华的财物要充满伫这个地面上。
So now the whole earth, not just the leader, has knowledge of God.
所以即马毋是只有这个领袖有这个上帝的财物，是规个世界全地拢有上帝的财物。
So the image here is that the spirit of knowledge that once rested just upon the leader now spreads throughout the whole world.
所以这个世界最后的结果，毋是只有上帝的神、智慧的神降临伫这个领袖的身上，即马上帝的神、智慧的神嘛扩散到全地。
And then verse 10,
第10节，
it says, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples.
伊咧讲亚西的根头要徛做万百姓的大旗。
So the image has shifted a little bit from verse 1.
所以这这个图小可转变甲第1节已经佫无啥相像。
In verse 1, we had a stump of Jesse.
伫第1节，咱有这个亚西的根头。
Now we have a root of Jesse.
毋过第10节，咱即马这个树头已经生根定根。
So roots going down into the earth. Roots for future growth.
这个根将来的这个生长，这个根已经深入伫这个定根伫地上。
So the passage begins with this image of something cut down and potentially dying.
所以一开始的是咱看到的图，一开始是讲一丛树仔插起来，只有剩一个树头啦，对。
And the passage ends with this hope that the root of Jesse has gone down into the ground in order to create new life.
毋过伫这段圣经在结束的所在，这个树头已经发这个根，搁再深入伫地面上，成做将来搁再生长的一个愿望。
This is what leadership following the Spirit is about.
这就是军队耶和华的神所产生的这种的领导会当产生的结果。
Leadership is about creating new life.
领导是要创造新的愿望、新的生命。
Jesus said, I come that you may have life.
耶稣讲：“我来，互恁会当得到活命。”
And in order to have life, to be alive, there has to be roots going down into the ground.
你若要有活命，你就要有根深入伫地上、地土骹。
So what do you think about these spiritual gifts and leadership?
所以你对这个属灵的恩赐有关领导的属灵的恩赐智慧的恩赐，你有啥物看法？
What questions or comments do you have?
你有啥物种的问题？还有啥物种的评论？
So how do we rethink our ways of leadership training or leadership skill training like this?
咱要安怎来重新思考训练教会的领导者？
One way I think is to not rely so much on the business world's model.
我 我会当想的头一项吼，是咱毋通过头来挖靠即个商业的世界咱的外口的即个世界因所咧训练领导的方法。
Those principles in business can be helpful, but I think we have to realize we're not running a business, we're leading a church.
遐个外口的即个商业做生意的即个世界迄种经营的世界因咧训练领袖的方法，当然嘛是真有路用啦。毋过咱爱知咱毋是咧经营一个企业，咱是咧领导上帝的教会。
So we can read about the 5 steps of good leadership, but we also have to read that in light of texts like Isaiah 11 that talk about the spiritual gifts.
你会当去学咱看讲有啥物好的外口咧讲好的一个经营者、领袖CEO 迄个五步要来做到迄，毋过请你也毋通袂记你以赛亚在你章咧讲领袖的条件。
When I read the business books on leadership, for example, I don't hear much talk of love, peace, patience.
我咧读即个外口咧讲外口的世界的领袖，迄种的册拢无啥咧讲疼啦公义啦和平。
They're oftentimes not talking, these business books are not talking about wisdom. They're talking about knowledge and intelligence and being not being wise.
即个册经营者即种的智慧的册拢咧讲即种知识较无咧讲即个智慧的代志。
And I also think that leadership is about, for biblical leadership, is about it's about new life and new growth.
圣经咧讲的即个领导有若是有关即个嘛咧讲即个成长新的生命。
So the important question for a leader is, where can I help growth or new life happen in my community?
所以对领导者一个真重要的问题是讲，我要安怎互我的牧会教会，也是讲即个社区会当成长，会当有新的生命。
And I don't mean growth just as going from 25 people to 50 people. That's not just what growth is.
我咧讲的成长是咧讲你对25人创到50人迄种的数字上的迄种的成长，毋是只有咧讲迄。
New life and growth is also about helping people through their crises and through their problems.
咧讲成长甲新的生命是咧讲帮助，嘛是咧讲上司嘛咧帮助遮个人要安怎对即个危机困难的中间，搁再行出来。
We have many people in our churches who feel like their tree has been cut down.
咱有真侪教会内底人感觉讲因的树已经互人扯起来。
And our job as leaders is to go to them and say, it may be cut down, there may be loss here, but look, there's a branch growing out.
咱的责任做教会领导者咱爱甲遮个人讲对啦，看起来咱亲像吵起来，毋过看，还佫有一个影在布影。
Other questions?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I understand so well. But it's the last part you were saying that Jesus said, "I come to you and give you a new life." If I hear you right, then you continue to say that it's from the root. Root means that God, Spirit. When you say this word's root, is that mean God?
Yes.
It has to be from God or from the Spirit.
That's right. Yeah.
Am I right?
The Spirit. Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
right. Yeah. Others? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm much encouraged by what you say. At this age, I feel like I've been cut down. I've been going through a classroom, seminary classroom teacher for 19 years. a church mission board administrator, and then lastly a pastors. And going through, I found that a sense of irrelevance, because when I saw the church, when the way they think that I'm old style, and I could not entertain. People come to church to be entertained. I'm not an entertainer,
Right.
and I'm not a manager.
Right.
Pastor became like a manager.
Right.
Multiple staff,
Yeah.
and all this. To this, what do you think? Our future church. Do you have any sort of a guidance? A new model of a church rather than taking from the corporate world.
Right.
Now that is a real model.
Right.
You look at the television evangelist and all this,
Sure.
and entertainer. It's like a big concert.
Right.
So what shall we do as a humble, small pastor coming out with a $70,000 a student loan debt?
Right.
And you are assigned to a church that will not even pay you enough to eat.
Right.
讲遮尔长，教授你的话，互我得到一大鼓励啦。因为我有当时我拢感觉伫即个年纪我现在即个年纪我拢感觉我若亲像咧找树仔，互人撮起来烧啥。我捌伫新行医甲19档我的生涯，我也捌伫即个教会的机构侍奉，最后我也捌牧会，我拢一直感觉讲家己想别人检采安尼看我，若亲像拢迄种迄个老式的阮即种拢过时的。因为我也袂晓娱乐遮个会友即现在教会哪像咧娱乐会友，我也毋是迄种做生意迄种的经营者。即摆教会哪像嘛是拢咧做伙，我毋知影讲到底教授你感觉讲将来的教会爱有啥物种的模式，有啥物种的模式，互对遮个也是讲对遮个新的遮个传教者你要安怎互伊有即个新的现象，还是讲将来要安怎行？因为伊读神学院了后欠银行欠足侪钱，即马来侍奉一个教会，所付你的薪水还佫袂当无法度通行遐个债务的时，你要安怎互伊有一个到底将来迄个意是啥物货？我安尼讲肯对。
And this is what I really feel, talk to young seminary graduates.
就真正是我想要爱对迄个新学院的新的即个毕业生所讲的话。
I think there are two important questions in your talk. What is the church, and what is a pastor?
我想你的问题内底有两项重点。第一，就是什么是教会？教会是啥物？第二是牧师是啥物？
And I think as soon as the church decides to follow whatever trend is happening out there, then it will forever be following after the next trend. It'll have to change itself every 5 years.
我想一旦教会若决定要对这个潮流来行啦，外口是啥物种型，你就要对外口的型我来讲，每5档你就爱改一摆，因为你对一直爱对落啊。外口的潮流一直咧改。
Because one trend might be that it's about the drums, and then 5 years later, no, the drums are no good, right? Kids don't want to hear the drums anymore. Now they want to hear guitar. And so the church has to change. And then, no, they don't want to hear the guitar. Now they want a big screen television, right?
所以对潮流就会变做安尼啦。即马你讲我要爱有鼓毋过几年后，囡仔讲我要听鼓，我要听吉他，你就去改吉他。煞来佫几年后，伊讲迄我也无爱啊，我要爱足大的音幕，你就去装迄安尼一项过一项。
So all of that really doesn't matter. What I think the church offers that other places can't offer.
我想遐拢无重要。教会会当互人的物件，应该是别个所在拢找袂到。
I think the church can offer a place where people are loved and cared for.
教会会当提供一个空间、一个场所，互人感觉讲，你有互人疼，你有互人关心你。
So when the church becomes a community, a real community of love, then I think that offers something to our kids that they can't find many other places.
教会成做一个疼的团体吼，这是互咱的囡仔下一代吼上好的物件，别位的所在无拄拄会找到。
And I think the other thing to say is that I think the next generation actually may not want to be entertained.
我咧想讲吼，咱的下一代吼，佮过迄代，无拄拄会想讲伊着爱人着爱家娱乐呢，伊无拄拄会想要互人家娱乐。
Entertainment to them seems fake, not real.
娱乐对因来讲吼，检查吼足假，毋是真的。
So churches who have turned to entertainment models, who have become entertainers, I think they're going to be irrelevant again because the younger generation is going to look at that and say, that's not good. They're not as good as these professional singers, right? So they're kind of fake.
下一代吼，伊检查会想讲吼，伊无爱即种吼娱乐的模式，因为你外交。外口遐职业的歌手比你较高啦，所以你无高甲像因遐高，所以感觉讲啊，这都拢假嘛。
So I think there are probably a lot of different strategies that we can do to invite people in, but I think the real point is once they come to us, are we willing to accept them and love them and make them a part of the community of God?
我想不管你的策略是啥，变来变过去，我想重要的是讲人来到教会的时，你有要接纳伊，你有要听伊，互伊感觉伊是即个团体一部分啊无？
即个我用台湾话讲就好，把它翻译者。即个传统对即个以赛亚11章即个解说吼，就是讲即个耶稣树头大笔以后即个君吼发即个印上顶以后呢，耶稣基督来带来即个世界改变，也是讲生命的改变，亲像讲即个。财龙吼，即个三角大，即个人的本性的改变，吼，伫基督内面，请做即种的新的生命。今仔日即个解说，我感觉讲以前毋捌去想着，毋捌读着，即种的角度来看伊的书，这是有影真正帮助。我本身对即个圣经吼的即个application 吼，伫遐感觉安尼一个真大的即个亮光。所以我今仔日即个解说这非常宝贵，非常好。另外，咱是毋是有缘需要来强调讲，这原来是对耶稣基督吼的迄个救赎。即个带来将来新的生命，上帝国的内面的改变，是咱有缘需要即个信息也相关需要来传达。
你太讲真。Thank you, Professor, about sharing with us the new insight. Because traditional Christian understanding of Isaiah chapter 11 is about the stump and the new branches. We traditionally understood that as a symbol of Jesus Christ coming into this world to transform it so that the world will become a place where wolves and lambs can live peacefully together. But today I've learned new things from you, and it's very precious. But do you think we still need to cultivate the understanding or interpretation about Jesus Christ coming into this new world through this passage to give new life to the church and our community?
Yes, I think it's perfectly fine and good for Christians to read this in light of Jesus. And I think that's what the New Testament authors are doing too.
会啦，真好。你会当去继续安尼读吼，我想有真有帮助。事实上，这也是新约的教会读这段以赛亚11章的方法。
But in reading this about Jesus, I don't want to then to get us off the hook. We don't have to do anything because it's Jesus that is the ultimate leader. Because I think the passage also has relevance for us as leaders.
不过我无希望大家人读这个圣经节，只有想到耶稣。因为咱拢毋是耶稣，拢想讲这个圣经节甲我拢无关系。我爱咱大家人对较历史上原来迄个情景的角度来看，所以伊才会当应用伫咱的身上。若无这若去讲耶稣就耶稣就好啊。耶稣是一个完美的领袖，这段圣经甲咱无关系。
So if we read this as Jesus doesn't judge by what he sees, what he hears, that's fine. But then we have to say, and we are followers of Jesus. And so, of course, we also want to do those very same things.
所以你若要读讲这是咧指耶稣耶稣无凭伊的耳孔所听、目睭所看来判断，无要紧。毋过你若详细嘛，就爱读讲，咱是跟对耶稣的人，耶稣的学生，所以你嘛毋好用目睭所看、目睭所看、耳孔所听来判断。安尼读我才有意义啦。
我即摆算问题嘛是一摆的回应，是讲吼，头我刚刚在分享到3对6项的第三组迄个所在，讲财帛甲敬畏吼。我在听的时，我就感受到是讲，敬畏耶和华是财帛的开端这个开始我的体会是讲吼，敢是讲咱对耶和华上帝明白吼，会互咱对上帝有一个敬畏的心。咱明白耶和华上帝，咱对上帝就咱有一个敬畏的心，并且伫迄个应该是迄个后壁是讲，敬畏耶和华来做欢喜。那可能我感觉是讲，咱对上帝有这个明白，就是有这个关系，一个 relationship 的时候，就是有这个明白耶和华做咱的欢喜。这是我想到的物件呢。
Okay, it's a question and also a comment. I think the third pair of the six elements, the third pair about knowledge and fear of the Lord, that kind of spirit, and the following verse, people will take fear of the Lord as delight. I think it is very natural to me. It doesn't create any difficulty for me. That's his comment. Knowledge will automatically lead to the reverence or fear of the Lord. I find it very natural, very logical.
And that may be because
the translation.
Yeah, the Taiwanese word is so great. Yeah, English doesn't have that. We have to have two different words.
Yeah. 可能因为咱台语真好嘛，英语无法度人将两种意思敬甲畏拢合做伙，所以可能对英语的基督徒来读可能就爱需要某一种较困难的迄种转换啦。
The English word fear, just the fear part, not the reverence part, is not a emotion that people want to have. So I think when people hear fear, they think this is not good. I don't want to be afraid.
英语吼就无只有肺的部分吼，所以大家感觉讲啊，我都无爱肺啊，我无爱惊啊吼，啊惊是无好的一种情绪，所以较无法度做一种联想。
我想讲，这个世界即马变甲遮尔歹吼，就是讲像讲污染啦，是种种的经济的犯罪啦吼，变甲这个世界是国家是各种的制度遮尔差吼，其实就是甲即在圣经有关系，就是讲运用遮个财物知识，但是欠缺敬畏上帝吼，也是讲。敬畏对即款的永续的，也是讲上帝创造的迄个有责任的咧运用吼，即个会递到今仔日世界安尼，所以就是讲，像讲学校的教育有教这个知识，但是并无有相对的即个伦理啦吼，也是即款的应该敬畏上帝，保守即个世界，还是宇宙安怎？迄落，即个到底伫个咱教会爱安怎来强调？是讲应该安怎来促进规个社会，还是迄落会教育的制度要安怎甲巧好会再真正带来和平甲公义。
But what you have just shared inspire me to reflect upon the real world situation right now. Look at the environment situation, the economic system, how bad that it is right now, and I do think that because the world has emphasized education as imparting simply knowledge without wisdom of any kind, so that we have means to improve the world, but does not know how to do it. So what do you think as a church we should do to bring up this awareness of, let's say, for example, equal justice, or how to bring upon a new world that is closer to the idea of Isaiah chapter 11 is trying to present?
Big question. Good question. I think that's right. I think many of the big problems that we have, the world is trying to solve through business or corporate models. So I think that the unique thing that Christians can offer is that theological perspective, and that always striving for wisdom and not just knowledge.
我想，咱的世界咧解决现在这个问题拢一直注重伫即个社会所看会到即个经营生理的即种模式。咱的教会所以咱提供的是对圣经的某一种无相像的一个角度来看这个代志。
And then for the eco-justice or other issues out there, I don't have a handy solution. I think what I tell my students is to get involved locally, to get involved with their local church and begin to, because there's many different causes, not just, there's many problems out there in the world that we all need to be working on. So find whatever is your passion and try to communicate that to your local community and try to get them behind you and supporting you, and try to bring a biblical and theological perspective to the problem, so that you're not just posing the problem as a problem that doesn't really have any sort of biblical, the Bible doesn't speak to, but that it's a problem that we can use the Bible to address the problem.
当然，这个世界遮尔大的这个问题我无真 真简单的这个解决的方法啦。不过我拢鼓励我的学生，我的学生对这个上基础的所在，对你上周围的所在来开始，来应用圣经的真理啦。你若直接对遐就跳到迄个大问题，你会感觉讲我就毋知要安怎开始。所以对你的周围的环境，对教会也好，对你的周围的社区，看你的热情伫啥物所在，你对遐来开始应用圣经的真理，我想对遐会当对小的改变，渐渐安尼至到搁较大的改变。
多谢你指出，在教会领导者需要有摇花的灵，还有灵的温顺。这个美国基督教会所出版的这个《Book of Worship》，洗礼时，牧师在替这接受洗礼人的祈祷中间，完了有引用这个以赛亚11章，这个祈祷为着接受洗礼人。会通有聪明的灵，会通有这个无量的灵，也是讲一捌摇花甲敬畏摇花的灵，都是一个上界要紧的问题，是要安怎样好，要安怎样会通有这个摇花的灵，这个甲这个灵的温顺。我想这是咱一直感觉讲，这个。大家嘛是非常重视灵的温顺这个重要性。毋过，这个到底要安怎样通得到这个摇花的灵，还是这个灵的温顺？需要咱的了解，这个摇花的灵，还是灵的温顺，是赏赐互上帝拣选的人啊对。即马，咱大家嘛认为讲咱是上帝所拣选的，不过。是咱的困难是，要安怎样得到这个灵的温顺灵的期待？
I thank you for pointing out the importance of leaders having the wisdom or the spirit of God upon them. As a matter of fact, the book of worship of the of PCUSA also emphasized. Also actually quotes Isaiah chapter 11 when we are doing our baptism. Yeah, so the liturgy part also use this same segment of biblical text. That's all wonderful. But for me, the real question actually is, I know the importance of having these qualities. But for me, the problem, the issue really is how. How do we make sure that we help people to acquire those qualities? Because it seems to me that in the Old Testament, those qualities are only given by those chosen ones, elected ones, those, as you say, the judges, the kings. How do we know? Or is there any means to?
How do we receive?
How do we receive those special qualities?
Yeah, well, the first theological point to make is that the Spirit only, in the Old Testament, the Spirit only comes upon these people. Then in the New Testament, of course, Pentecost, and the Spirit comes upon, Jesus breathes the Spirit onto his disciples in the upper room. And then the Spirit comes down when Jesus ascends. And so now we all have available to us this same Spirit, right?
第一，我爱指出对，我旧约看起来那真像上帝的灵只有降临伫这领袖的顶面不过对新约的角度来看你嘛会使安尼讲对耶稣以后，耶稣伊过活了后伊将伊的气分伫伊的学生的身上。伫五旬节的时，圣神的降临即摆上帝的灵逐个人拢会当得到。
As far as receiving the Spirit, I think it's a matter of spiritual formation. I mean, I think it's just really basic practices that we've forgotten, like prayer, silence, contemplation, meditation, reading the Bible, acts of kindness toward our neighbors and our strangers. right? So I think it's actually basic level things that we don't necessarily think are changing us, but actually slowly over time, they are shaping us into the image.
你讲若实际面吼，要安怎得到即种的灵吼？我想就要转来到基督徒的灵命的塑造的根本吼。就是讲你敢有咧祈祷，你敢有咧读圣经，你敢有咧灵修、默想吼，你敢有咧服务即个社会，听你的社区，亲像听你的厝边，即个基本的物件吼，当然毋是一夜之间吼会当咱造成大的转变。 毋过渐渐你若有咧实践吼，即个基本的灵修吼，即个属灵的温素吼，你会当得到。